It's pretty easy to say you have values, right? I mean, we all like to think we're people of principle. But the real test, the true measure of what you believe in, well, that comes when it actually costs you something. So let's ask the question, what is a principle really worth? Check out this number, $17 million. Now, this isn't just some random number from a lottery ticket. About 25 years ago, this number represented a choice, a massive, life-altering choice one person had to make between a fortune and something he believed was far more valuable. And that's really the big question we're diving into, isn't it? It seems completely irrational. Why on earth would anyone in their right mind just walk away from this kind of money? Well, the answer is in the incredible story of an NBA player named John Amaechi. All right, so let's really dig into this. Let's unpack the choice that led to this monumental, and for most of us, unbelievable decision. Okay, to really get this, you have to see the sheer scale of this jump. John Amaechi was making a decent salary, but by NBA standards, it was pretty modest. Then, the Los Angeles Lakers come calling and offer him a contract that was nearly 60 times that amount. Just imagine that for a second. It was a truly staggering, life-changing offer. And what makes this even crazier is where he was just a year before this offer. He wasn't some big superstar. Nope. He was the guy literally calling front offices himself, just begging for a spot on a summer league team, just for a chance. Most teams wouldn't even give him the time of day. But one coach, Doc Rivers of the Orlando Magic, he gave him that shot. So this gets us right to the heart of it. This decision wasn't about being loyal to a team. It was about something deeper. It was about a priceless principle, one he learned from his mother. This was the advice his mom gave him, and it just stuck with him. See, Amaechi knew the NBA was a cutthroat business. He knew Orlando would probably trade him in a heartbeat if a better player came along. So this wasn't about loyalty to the team. No, this was about being loyal to himself and to his own character. And here's the big takeaway, right? A principle isn't just an idea you hold when it's easy or convenient. A true principle is what you stick to when it's hard, when it actually costs you something. And for John Amaechi, that cost was a cool $17 million. So what happened in the long run? What was the payoff? Well, in his life after the NBA, Amaechi works with people when they're at their most vulnerable. And when they ask him, "Can I trust you?" he's got one heck of an answer. His integrity has a literal price tag. That builds a kind of trust that money just can't buy. And, this whole idea, it's not just about personal choices. It's actually a cornerstone of what makes a great leader. We can see this play out time and time again with some really incredible historical figures. Let's talk about Audie Murphy, the most decorated American soldier of World War II. His bravery on the battlefield is the stuff of legends. This guy single-handedly held off an entire company of German soldiers from the top of a burning tank destroyer. Just an absolutely unbelievable story of heroism. But, there are different kinds of courage, right? There's that physical courage, facing down enemy fire, which Murphy obviously had tons of. But then there's moral courage, the guts to stand up for what's right, even when the pressure isn't coming from a tank. And this is where we see that moral courage shine. After the war, this guy was world famous. Companies were lining up to offer him a fortune to endorse their alcohol and tobacco products. But Murphy, even though he really could have used the money, he said no. He didn't want kids looking up to their hero and thinking it was cool to do things he felt were harmful. He put his principles way ahead of his wallet. And this idea of sacrifice, it's not new, not by a long shot. Let's jump way back in time, all the way to ancient Rome, and look at one of its greatest leaders, the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius. Okay, so you gotta picture the scene. Marcus is facing a crisis that's almost impossible to imagine. A horrible plague is wiping people out, there's famine everywhere, the economy is in absolute freefall, and the treasury is bone dry. Rome was on the brink of total collapse. So what does he do? He could have just raised taxes, right? Or seized property from the wealthy. But he did the exact opposite. He holds this massive 2-month-long auction right on the lawn of the Imperial Palace. He's selling off his own stuff, his jewels, his gold furniture, priceless art, all to fund the state, and more importantly, to send a message to his people. I'm in this with you. So you have to wonder, where does a mindset like that even come from? This willingness to just give things up? Well, it's rooted in this really powerful philosophy about what wealth and independence actually mean. Yeah, Marcus didn't just pull this out of thin air. He learned it from the emperor who came before him and adopted him, a guy named Antoninus Pius. And one of the very first things Antoninus did as emperor was draw a hard line in the sand. The empire's money was not his money. He kept his personal finances totally separate from the public treasury. When his own wife complained that he was being a little too thrifty, this was his answer. He got it. He understood that with leadership, even his own personal wealth was really in service to the people. The higher you climb, the less your life is about you. And you can trace this all the way back to Roman statesmen like Cato the Elder. This guy was famous for living a super simple life. He wore cheap clothes, worked in the fields right alongside his slaves. But his frugality, it wasn't about being cheap. No, it was about being independent. And that is the whole key. There's this great story where some emissaries came to try and bribe Cato. They find him at his simple little house boiling turnips for his dinner. And they just realize right then and there, their mission was hopeless. I mean, how can you possibly bribe a man who wants nothing? His simplicity was his superpower. All right, so let's bring this all together. When you look at all these stories, from an NBA player to a war hero to a Roman emperor, a really powerful theme starts to emerge about what the real reward is for this kind of discipline. It's not about punishing yourself or living with less just for the sake of it. The real payoff is freedom. The freedom to listen to your conscience. The freedom to do what you know is right. The freedom to say no when it really, really matters because you're not a slave to your desires or your bank account. And this all ties back beautifully to the 4 cardinal virtues of Stoicism. You've got the courage of Murphy and Amachi, the discipline of Cato, the justice of Marcus Aurelius, and the wisdom to understand that real wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you're willing to live without. So that leaves all of us with one final question to think about. This isn't necessarily about turning down millions of dollars, right? It's about the little choices we all face every single day. So, look at your own life. What matters to you more than money? What principle is so important that you'd actually pay a price to stick to it? In other words, what are you free enough to say no to?